Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and welcome to another episode of Media Matters for Anfield Index. It's the international break, isn't it? So it may seem quiet for many, but there's plenty of rumours and plenty of noise around things like contracts, transfers, and other things at Liverpool. And there's just a small matter of a charge towards the title set to begin. And a welcome as ever, the renowned and the respected David Lynch. I mean, David, nice just having this little bit of international break before the madness starts, I guess.
Yeah, but particularly, I guess, because it has been pretty relentless recently as well. And I mean, we've seen a little bit of tiredness in the legs maybe in some recent games. And, it's understandable, really. I mean, the amount of it's just been weekend midweek for feels like months now, doesn't it? So, I guess a bit of rest for, well, not necessarily for all the players because a lot of them have headed out on international duty, but for us, it's a nice change at least. And I suppose there's a little bit of a gap as well, isn't there, to the game for when they do come back from international duty. So that should be helpful, and hopefully we see a really good version of Liverpool, the best version, over the remaining 9 games of the season, and they can kind of romp home to the title.
Yeah, fingers crossed. That will be the nice outcome that everyone's looking for. And we'll start, people, where we usually do with international breaks and the off-the-field news. Now, this one actually came late last night, David, to be honest. It was in one that I don't know if it caught everyone by surprise is the right word, but Liverpool and Everton fail in a cheeky bid to bring the Merseyside derby forward 24 hours. That just kind of came from nowhere a little bit, didn't it?
Yeah, and I haven't stood it up myself, so I haven't really heard anything about this. But it's an interesting one. I guess it would have made sense for, as you said in the piece, I guess made sense for both teams in terms of making that one worthwhile for them. And obviously it would have been helpful for Liverpool in the title race as well to give Everton that little bit of extra rest. But obviously they've failed in that, so it's not going to be the case. And Everton, you hope, have got enough left in the tank for that Saturday 12:30 kickoff against Arsenal that follows it. But we'll have to see.
Yeah, it's interesting one that both clubs were happy with it, but maybe say with the extended break and the little bit of the gap and no games on the FA Cup weekend, maybe the Reds and the bodies there were happy with it. So Wednesday it is, people. And I know everyone like you is going to be focused on international football and thinking, please, no one get injured. I mean, it didn't start, it seemed, with the best news because Alisson got his concussion and he was back from Brazil duty. We saw the Ryan Gravenberch news that he'd left the camp due to an injury that's linked to the Carabao final, it seems. And then there was a bit of a worry when Konate was taken off at half-time. It looks like that one, though, was just a tactical decision by Didier Deschamps for France. Is there any update around Gravenberch? Because that's the one that everyone's wanting to know. Is this more precautionary or is there something to be concerned about here?
Yeah, so I could say that the kind of sources close to the player are playing it down and making out that it's not too serious. So in theory, the talk is at the moment that it should be absolutely fine for the derby. It's one where didn't want to risk it on international duty, and he had to you have to fulfill that really and go out there, let their doctors have a look at you. But he did that. They had a look, figured he probably wouldn't be in great shape for these 2 games that the Netherlands have got, and sent him home. So I don't think it's, in terms of the injury blows you could get, it's not too bad that he goes there, misses international duty. It's a nice little cheeky one that you can get away with. So, and he gives him a little bit of a rest as well, which I don't think is a bad thing, because for me, all this talk that all the players are tired, I don't really buy into this, but I totally understand where people are coming from if they think that Gravenberch is looking a little bit leggy, because this is the longest and most intense season of his career so far, and maybe we're just seeing a few signs of that recently. So yeah, a couple of weeks off and putting his feet up, and then that extra little bit of a break as well before the derby, I think that'll do him the world of good, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And everyone's keeping an eye on the internationals. I mean, touch wood so far, it doesn't look like it's been too bad. There's the South American boys will play in the early hours of Wednesday morning, so they'll have the week still. Fingers crossed that nothing goes wrong with that. I mean, it's looked okay. The worst bit so far seems to have been Van Dijk paying extra time, which no one really wanted. And there's a lot of minutes in Virgil's legs. But just the other games, like Gakpo probably playing some minutes suits him. It's not been too bad so far, has it?
No, exactly. As you say, with Van Dijk, I guess that's the kind of annoying bit, isn't it, about Nations League and it being competitive is that you have that additional extra time just thrown in there as something else to be concerned about. But again, you got to say that Van Dijk, he looks after himself, doesn't he? He's used to playing a lot of minutes in a season, and there is, it's not coming back to play at the weekend, so he does have that little bit of extra rest. Yeah. So that is definitely helpful. And then there are bonuses as well. Gakpo has looked like he's needed games, looks like he's needed minutes. He scored a goal, which will be good for him. So hopefully he's coming back with a little bit of rhythm that he was definitely lacking when he came back into the team. So I think that's a real benefit. So he can kind of swing either way, can't it? There are positives and negatives to it, but I guess from that one squad, you've seen both sides of it. As I say, Gravenberch missing out, Gakpo getting some form that he needed, and then Van Dijk playing more than you would have liked to. So it's it's one of those. It's a bit of both really in terms of positives and negatives, and you just hope that the positives outweigh the negatives, and that all of them come back and are in good shape for the Everton game.
Yeah, fingers crossed that the early hours of Wednesday or before then bring no further drama. And I suppose positional wise, because everyone's looking ahead a little bit to that game against Everton, probably the biggest news people are wondering and hoping is that with the gap, we literally had no right backs. Jarell Quansah played at Wembley, didn't he, against Newcastle, and everyone was waiting kind of for an update on Trent, probably not too hopeful, and it seems to be suggested it's a April return, which leaves a big gap there for when that would be. And also Connor Bradley, people are hoping he's going to, we'll get some imminent news. He's back in training. I suppose that ultimately the question is, David, is there a hope we'll have a natural right back for the derby?
I don't think it'll be Trent. I can say that much. Obviously, that April return being slated there, I'd be pretty surprised if he was back for the derby. With Connor Bradley, I haven't heard anything for a couple of weeks now, so maybe we'll see. Maybe we'll get a nice surprise there. But again, don't know if that's still maybe another game or another couple of games away from him coming back. So, at the moment, as things stand with what I know at the moment, it wouldn't be shocked at all to see Quansah lining up at right back again, which, he's a good player, but it's a blow, isn't it? Liverpool aren't quite as threatening with him there, and it does affect the balance of the team. But equally, it's a Merseyside derby at Anfield, and I think, if you can't, you sometimes got to cope in games and in seasons with moments like this where, Liverpool don't have a lot of injuries at all. They've done quite well for injuries this season, but they've got a concentration of all three kind of right backs who can play it in a natural way are all out at the moment. So that is painful, but you've got to get through these moments. And if you're going to win a title, you've got to kind of come through them and try and win and find a way around that issue. So if it is Quansah at right back, which I currently would expect it to be, then, Liverpool have just got to cope with that and show that, that's not a big enough blow to stop them being a better side than Everton at Anfield.
Yeah, fingers crossed with that one. And I suppose on the right back situation, because there's a few people almost, and you can see why they're starting to talk about it a bit more. We've not really discussed sort of right back, or there's no imminent links with right backs to come in. But obviously, I think a lot of people suspect what's going to happen with Trent by this summer. And Connor Bradley's now unfortunately moved into that camp of he's actually missed more games than he's been available for in the last few years. Do you think there is a bit of a concern around the right back position going into the summer?
Yeah, I think Connor Bradley's, the fact it's consistently muscle issues is a little bit of a concern, because that the players who tend to get those tend to get them a lot. Canate's been on that list in the past of players, although, maybe we should take a little bit of hope from the fact he's been managed through those this season and hasn't really had many issues. So, I mean, the one injury he's had this season came when he got a knock on his knee, which was, if someone fell on him, there's not a lot you can kind of do about those issues. So, this medical staff and this football staff have shown that they're capable of managing these issues. So hopefully in the coming years, they can get on top of Bradley's issues and it doesn't prove to be a problem. So, but it is a little bit of a concern at the moment that he has been kind of consistently picking those up. And I guess the other concern is obviously, is Trent even going to be there or not? So, we kind of don't know yet on that front, do we? And we'll have to see how that plays out. But obviously, it would be a question in your mind about, I've been very much in the camp that when Trent goes, you can't replace what he does. So you might as well have an orthodox right back who is very good at doing right back things, which is what Connor Bradley is. And I would be happy for him to be the replacement. And then you bring in someone who can kind of back that up. But it's yeah, it's just one of the things you've got to consider. Is he going to be able to get through a season in the way that Trent generally has done? Because you need those players. Availability, we always say, is the best ability, isn't it? So he needs to up that kind of resistance and ability to get through these seasons. So yeah, hopefully it's just a little bit of a bump in the road in his development, and it's not something that becomes a consistent issue.
Yeah, fingers crossed on that. And as you say, it's just one of the 8 million questions to answer this summer, or wonder what is coming up in the near future. And as it is international break, you probably won't be surprised to know that a lot of questions centre around transfers, contracts, what's going on. And that's what a lot of the stories are naturally during this international break. So there's quite a few coming from listeners, subscribers. So we'll kind of fire through these one by one. The first one, and I like this question, there's been naturally a lot of players especially linked to Anfield, or linked with a move to Liverpool. Who are you confident at the moment from your info? Not that they'll definitely come through the door at the AXA, but is on the shortlist or the club are having a real look at right now?
I don't think these names are going to surprise anyone at all, but obviously they're having a real look at left back. A left back will be signed this summer, and I think Milos Kerkez is very, very high on that list, and I think Jarell Hato is also being considered, maybe also being considered as that possible centre-half option as well. So I think they are two players you can categorically say are being followed very closely. And I do, like I say, I've mentioned Gutierrez in the past at Girona as someone that's being watched as well in that left-back position. So it's a couple of, names that we can say with, in a concrete sense are being definitely looked at. As you say, there's all sorts of obstacles can get in the way. I just would not be shocked at all if it ends up being Milos Kerkez. In terms of kind of putting my neck on the line a little bit more, because it's just everything about it seems to make an awful lot of sense. Player wants the move, would be willing to make that move. Liverpool in a good position. The Richard Hughes factor, the fact that Liverpool, as I say, are definitely going to sign a left back. He's got Premier League experience, really good age. All his numbers look really good on both sides of the ball. It just makes almost too much sense to kind of not happen. So, I like I say, definitely on the list. Would not be shocked if he was the one that they ended up popping for, because, another thing, the Jarell Hato links at the moment. I think Liverpool are going to want to go down the route of an orthodox left back more, which is why I'm thinking of Hato maybe as the centre half option instead, who can back up left back. So, like I say, and if it's going to be kind of traditional out and out left back, then Kirk, as I say, he just makes so much sense, and they definitely like him. So, you put all those things together. You can never guarantee anything in football, but I think there's a really strong chance he ends up at Anfield, I'd say.
I do think, most people expect a left back to end up at Anfield. I suppose if one comes in, and there does seem to be a bit of a debate in the fan base, but are you expecting it to be Tsimikas that departs rather than Robbo with a year left to go?
Yeah, I would expect it to be Tsimikas, yeah. I think there'll be interest in him out there. I think his desire to play football is growing now. He spent a long time at Anfield, got a few winners' medals, and hopefully get another in the Premier League this season. We've heard from Robertson as well, talking, haven't we, this week, in terms of his desire to still be first choice. Now, obviously, I think he's realistic in that he knows that Liverpool are going to sign someone who's going to start a lot of games in that position.
Yeah.
But I also think it signals a willingness to be there and be competition. And, there's still, look how much Tsimikas has played this season. There's still a lot of games for the guy who is the backup. You've got to kind of look after your fullbacks because they get through so much. So there will be a lot of games there. So, I would expect it to be Tsimikas out the door. Robertson is the kind of backup, albeit playing quite a lot. And then that left back signing them to instantly kind of improve the starting 11.
Yeah, I think a lot of fans would be happy with Kerkez especially. And I suppose if that's sort of the name you'd be leaning towards on the incoming side, was there anyone you'd bet money that they're pretty much going to be gone in this summer, even with a title medal, but they're probably heading out the door?
Yeah, there's a few. I think you can, very, very hard to guarantee things in football, but I think there are a few that are very close to that in terms of departures. I'd say, obviously, Darwin Núñez for me is absolutely nailed on to leave, be that to Saudi or somewhere else. Liverpool definitely willing to listen to offers, player willing to go. and a lot of clubs willing to kind of pay the price that Liverpool will be asking. So all the ingredients are there. So I, been calling this for a while, really, that I expect him to leave. Similarly, as I say, Tsimikas at left back would not shock me at all to see him be the one to go. I'd probably say it in stronger terms than that, really, that I expect him to leave. Joe Gomez, again, wants to play more football, came very close to leaving last season, and Liverpool would allow him to leave, albeit they know that they have to get a replacement. But I think that will resolve itself this summer, and he will go. And then there's a few who are kind of just on the fence, kind of 50-50s that are harder to call. So I would put all those ones that I've mentioned there in absolute concrete that they will leave. But then there's obviously a few other question marks about, who else could leave. And I've put Luis Diaz in that camp, 2 years left on his contract, big interest in him. Not quite the level of output Liverpool have wanted, so they would be willing to strike a deal. Wataru Endo, if he decides he wants to go, which is, one of the big reasons he stayed last summer is because he wanted to stay. He didn't want to give up on his move to Liverpool, whereas I think his mood's maybe going to change now because he hopefully, again, another winner's medal. Not very much action this season, albeit he's been an important part of the squad. I think he will want to go. So he's in that kind of camp of, if he does go down that route and feels that way, then Liverpool won't stand in his way by any means. And then, I suppose the similar would be said of Jota as well, although I think he would be hard to sell because of the injury record, to be honest. And again, he's 2 years left on his contract. So I don't think Liverpool would stand in his way, but I don't know how much interest will be there in him. So that's an interesting one. And again, I'd throw Chiesa in there as well because of, again, what is he feeling at the moment? Liverpool clearly wouldn't stand in his way. He's not a key member of the squad, but if he wants to stick around for another season, let's see. So many futures up in the air when you talk about it like that. A few that you can guarantee are going to leave. A few who we don't, could definitely leave. There's a real possibility. So could be a real summer of kind of huge turnover, which Liverpool generally look to avoid. But I just don't think we can this summer.
It is strange because I know almost when we'd started to talk about it, like right earlier in the season and almost steering ahead to the summer, it may be like one, possibly two changes in the forward line. But I know you wrote about Chiesa this week and his attitude being immaculate, but he's literally just not getting the minutes. It seems near impossible to imagine him sticking around in the current situation. Is the forward line, especially, would you say, just the one where it could be one or two, like Núñez, definitely, possibly Diaz, but it wouldn't surprise you, aside from Cody Gakpo, you could be looking at wholesale changes this summer.
Yeah, it's absolutely crazy when you think about it in terms of, we're talking about 6 forward options there, and literally 5 of them have got question marks hanging over them, obviously throwing in Salah with his contract. So it's absolute madness, really. And like for a club who don't like that huge turnover in one summer, that is a strange situation to be in, where you could quite easily see 4 leaving. I don't think that. I think the thing is, they won't allow that, I guess. I think, they'll try and limit it as much as they can. If they get big money for Darwin Núñez and they get big money for Luis Diaz, maybe they're saying to Chiesa, stick around, you're going to get more minutes this season. This is the season it's going to happen for you. And he in terms of his attitude and his willingness to stick around, he seems kind of happy. Obviously, he'll want to play more, but he doesn't seem like he's kicking up a fuss. And certainly the people I'm talking to are suggesting, as you say, that his attitude's been absolutely fantastic. So, maybe you can make a case to him. Look, it hasn't worked out for you this season, but next season we can use you. You can be helpful. You stick around with Gakpo. We tie Salah down to a new contract. Jota, we hope he has a better season in terms of his fitness and he can be useful for us. And then we sign another forward, and that kind of completes the set for us. But they've got to weigh all this up, and there are so many kind of variables involved. It's so difficult to kind of predict how it's all going to shake out. I'm pretty sure if you sat down Richard Hughes at the moment, and this is the hard thing about covering these things, is that to give any certainty, if you spoke to Richard Hughes now, I'm not entirely sure he could 100% tell you how this is going to shake out, because it depends on who they get offers for, how much it is, the timing of those. It's so many aspects that they can't quite control as things stand at the minute. So it's going to be absolutely fascinating this summer, and not just the forward line, all the way through the squad, these question marks. And I think it's going to be a really, really interesting one, which I'm glad glad of from a journalistic perspective as well, because to be honest, covering last summer was a bit of torture and there wasn't a lot to get into. So hoping they're a little bit more active in terms of ins and outs this time, and it makes a more interesting story.
Yeah, it does feel like it's going to be busy whichever way you dress it up. And one other thing that people are mentioning, and David Ornstein did a Q&A. Everyone knows David Ornstein, that his links in the industry. So a few things I wanted to ask you. He was asked about Dean Huijsen, who's now a Spanish international, isn't he? He's got that £50 million release clause, which Richard Hughes negotiated. So he'll know all about that and he'll know all about the player. There was mention in his answers there that some suggesting he could well move overseas, and he hasn't had anything specifically linking us with a move. But there are others that are mentioning repeatedly now Dean Huijsen to Liverpool. I suppose the two parts to this, heard anything more on it, and can you see it for this move?
Yeah, one thing you can absolutely guarantee, Liverpool will be watching him closely. I mean, Richard Hughes signed him, so he knows how good he is, knows his potential. He's a young centre-half who's doing brilliantly at a very, very high level in a team that's doing very, very well. Looks like he's got all the qualities to play for Liverpool. So, yeah. I can guarantee that Liverpool have been watching him and keeping an eye on him. Absolutely no question about that. But where I'm kind of sceptical about this one, and I think people need to prepare themselves for this, is that I don't know, if you're Liverpool, how you sell this move to Dean Huijsen this summer. They've basically kept Van Dijk and Konate fit all season. They will hope that they can do that again next season, or keep them fit for the majority. Yeah. Where do you sell to Dean Huijsen? Okay, you go from playing every week in the Premier League, learning so much, doing so well in a team that's flying, enjoying yourself. You're picking up things on a weekly basis, and as I say, learning lessons, to come and sit on our bench. And yes, I get it's Liverpool. Love to play for Liverpool. Come and learn from Van Dijk. But if you aren't playing games, that is frustrating for someone who has been playing games all season. I just don't know how you sell to him to come and be third choice for Liverpool, because if Konate and Van Dijk have another season like they have in terms of availability, and Konate in particular, I'm thinking of, he's just not going to get on the pitch outside of League Cup minutes or FA Cup minutes, and you might get knocked out of either of those tournaments much earlier. So I find it really, really hard to see that Dean Huijsen would be the one that go for. I think if Gomez does leave, as I expect, I think they're looking at someone who can come in and maybe be a fourth choice. So that's why I talk about Hato. That's why we see so many links to young centre-halves at the moment. Ordóñez at Bruges. There's the Greek defender whose name escapes me right now, but there's but they're looking at that kind of profile. It makes me think that you go Van Dijk, Konate, Quanta is third choice then to come in, and then your fourth choice is a young player who's willing to wait for the minutes, willing to play in the League Cup. That for me is how I see that shaking out. I just can't see how you say to Dean Huijsen, particularly as there's going to be so many other big clubs as well who are going to be able to say, you come to us and you'll be first choice. Liverpool can't say that. Their centre-halves are too good to offer that. So I really, really struggle to see that one. I might be wrong, and that's just me giving my kind of opinion rather than, but that's from my experience in the industry. I really, really do struggle to see that one coming off and him coming in as third choice.
Yeah, and Sleepy Forest maybe makes a good point that, a bad situation, but a good point. If VVD leaves and Huijsen is the replacement, I think that may be the feeling for some, that if he is going to come in, it could be if one of the others, which we don't want to happen in the first place. So yeah, as it stands right now. Yeah,
sorry to butt in there. That's a good point. Is this is why Liverpool will be monitoring all sorts of centre halves and all sorts of forwards and all sorts of midfielders. You've got to be prepared for these situations. So I think Huijsen is an easier sell if you do lose Van Dijk. Albeit, I still think Liverpool would go for someone who's maybe got as good as he is and as big a talent he is. I think they'd go for someone with a little bit more experience as well to be the direct Van Dijk replacement, to be honest. But he's a very, very talented player, and but I struggle to see. I think they'll tie up Van Dijk anyway, so I really struggle to see him coming to Anfield this summer, to be honest.
Yeah, it is a stretch, and maybe if it does happen, it's for something else we definitely don't want to happen. And it's funny you mentioned the contracts, because his top question for this was any Mo Salah word, because that seems to have gone a bit quiet. And he said, not that he was aware of. He just, as he said, knows that Liverpool have been optimistic for some time they'll reach an agreement because they want him to say, Salah wants to say, the numbers have got to be right. He did mention specifically, because there's been talk about term, that it's a proposed 2-year extension is what he's hearing, because the length of the contract's always been there. But also he mentions in this, it's important to say that he hasn't heard anything around the VVD and PSG, and everyone he's spoken to has almost played that down, said nothing that's in that. I suppose we just sit at this status quo, don't we? That two legends want to stay, everyone's waiting, and everyone's just starting to go like TikTok a little bit, aren't they?
Yeah, but as I say, I suppose that the kind of mood music around it is very positive on Salah and Van Dijk, and that's from, I've heard it from the players themselves. So, they're both desperate to stay. Liverpool want them to stay. I keep saying it, but Liverpool do not want to go into the market for a Van Dijk replacement. They don't want to be signing Dean Huijsen and saying, "Come and be Van Dijk for us next season," because as good as he is nowhere near him, and there's no one they could sign who was anywhere near him. So they don't want to do that. They don't want to have to replace Mo Salah, who he probably won't have a season like this next season, but he'll be Liverpool's top scorer again if he stays. You can guarantee that much. So. They don't want to be doing all this, particularly as, Trent, is just very hard to say whether he's going to want to do the Real Madrid a life experience, really. So they've already maybe got to go and get a world-class right back there. So it's a lot. It's a lot. And we've spoken about so many doubts over players in the squads. You need to take the contract guys out of it. So if they can get 2 of the 3 nailed down, then I'm pretty sure they will. And I think they will. I feel very confident that these two will stay. And then Trent is kind of down to him, really, and his decision that he makes on his life rather than anything else. So I think they will stay. And maybe we'll learn more about why there were such delays when they do get signed. These things do take time and maybe take longer than we even know. Even, with the information we do get from behind the scenes, maybe they take longer than that. But I'm still optimistic on both of those two at least. And if you get them signed up, that's a really good start to the summer for me.
I think if everyone was honest right now, with all the mood music, as you put it, everyone would take that Meatloaf style 2 out of 3 and just move on. That would be the ultimate thing at the moment. And I suppose in terms of players that aren't at the club, but do potentially, or maybe that's the question mark, have a future. I know you did a video on it this week about loan players, because you always forget how many players we've got out on loan, how many were billed as talents. And I know Louis Steele had said that when we had him on the pod, that the mood music coming back from Las Palmas was that Bajcetic doing well. And it's those youngsters people will look at ultimately, the bigger names, if you want, the Bajcetic, Doak and others. I suppose they have got talented, and just because you're not a Liverpool regular doesn't mean you're not a talented player. But the ultimate question comes down to, have these players got a future under Arne Slot and at Anfield, do you think, right now?
Yeah, well, I did that video this week, as you say, and I think the conclusion was quite gloomy, to be honest, in terms of, I kind of came to the conclusion that not a lot of them really have a chance, to be honest. But I guess, you've got to remember the level is so high, and Liverpool, it's not going to happen that frequently where you have a summer where, Quansah and Bradley were, I know people hate the phrase, but it's true. Quansah and Bradley were like new signings. Liverpool signed themselves a 4th choice centre half and a 2nd choice right back who, Bradley could be 1st choice right back. I think Quansah's got potential to be a Liverpool player in the long term. And just plucked them out of their academy or just brought them back from loans, and they were ready to fulfill these roles. It was absolutely incredible, really. So that's not going to happen every time. And, like you say, there's a few high-profile ones there. I think Doak, his numbers have been decent for Middlesbrough, but would you be signing him from a championship side, having done that, even given his young age? I'm not sure to play for Liverpool. And, the level he's got to reach is Cody Gakpo's output. We've seen Luis Diaz do okay for Liverpool, and we're all saying that's not enough. So the level is just outrageous, really. So I think with Doak, Liverpool were willing to accept offers of around 25 million last summer. I still think they'll accept similar this summer, and I think they'll be minded to strike a permanent deal. So I still kind of expect that. And the other one's Bajcetic, where I think he's the hardest one to predict, really. How much of that loan was about, we just need to get the minutes in him, or how much of it was Slot took a look and thought, this kid isn't ready to play for Liverpool at the moment. So that's a tough one to predict. And I don't think you can know that until he comes back for pre-season and the coaching staff get a look at him and whether he's ready. I still err on the side of him maybe not being. I think Liverpool will want someone who's a bit more ready in midfield this summer if they're to make a sign in there. But that one's kind of up in the air, and the rest, I think a lot of them are lined up for more loans, permanent sales. There's no one else really there that I think's definitely going to be able to make an impact on the first team. I think the closest maybe would have been Owen Beck to come in as a kind of backup left back, for example. But he's 22 now. He's ready to make his permanent move. Liverpool are going to sign a left back. They've got Andy Robertson. They've got Tsimikas, one of whom they need to shift. So I don't think the spot's going to open up for him there. But, football can be about timing like that in many ways. But yeah, outside of that, don't really see an awful lot really out there on loan that's going to impact the first team next season, to be honest.
And it sounds negative, but in the harsh reality of football, there's still good money to be made. Like you said, Ben Doak, 20 to 25 million. You'd wonder what you get from Bajcetic, Owen Beck. They all sort of top up into a big pot. And even if the ones who maybe could go in a year or so, you can still see good loans for the likes of McConnell and Doak. So the loan system and even sales, it can still work well for Liverpool, can't it?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I looking towards this summer, I had a few comments on a recent video I did about what the summer could kind of look like in general for Liverpool. And a few of those, the net spend's going to be nothing this summer. Yeah, good. I don't think it should be. I don't think it needs to be. I think there's genuinely a chance that Liverpool could sign 5 players and break even. I don't think they need a big net spend because, say you get 25 million for Doak. Say they do think with Bajcetic it's time to sell him and they get whatever they get for him. You sell Núñez for big money to Saudi. Same with Luis Diaz. All of a sudden, you've got an unbelievable sum of money there to kind of play with. And Liverpool strike smart deals, generally speaking. I mean, look at that midfield rebuild. How much did he pay for Gravenberch and McAllister? I know Szoboszlai was on the more expensive side, but if they do that kind of throughout the squad, they could break even, as I say, and completely revolutionise what this squad looks like. So, I just think there's an ability there to have a very low net spend and still do really well. So, I think that's. I just think it just shows Liverpool can have another smart summer basically where the net spend's low and if it makes the squad better and that is we've seen before that is possible, then that's definitely a positive.
Yeah, fingers crossed. I'm always one, and I know I want us to spend when we need to, and sometimes you need to invest to big players, especially if certain ones leave. But if you can be smart and spend the least possible, because there might be a time when you need to save them funds for a big move, it is what it is, as long as the team works out, as we know, stronger. But it does feel like it's going to be a summer of change, the biggest for a while. And the only other question I had, which was a good one for one of our listeners, was if there was maybe a surprise one. I mean, the Joe Gomez one kind of came a little bit from nowhere all of a sudden last summer, didn't you? Wonder, would they sell him to get some funds in? It was interesting. It was phrased as almost a sacrifice this summer. But if there was one you thought could be just a surprise departure to raise funds, or maybe because the future's not there, was there anyone you'd think could be that player?
I think maybe Harvey Elliott falls into that category, I guess. I think he would prefer to stay. I don't think Liverpool are going to be absolutely pushing him out the door because they've already got so much to do this summer anyway. But it can't, if he did knock on the manager's door and say, there's an offer here for me, I do want to go, then I don't think Liverpool would massively stand in his way. But, I think ideally they would avoid that, would hope that he would play a little bit more next season. And I think he would hope to play more next season. I don't think he wants to go, by the way. Anyone I speak to who's close to him says he wants to stay. So, but I guess that's one that could maybe catch us by surprise. But I mean, goodness me, Liverpool have got so much to do already, so many potential exits that we can predict. I doubt they're going to want to add many more on top of that because you're talking unbelievable churn there, really. And by the way, it's just a off topic. There's the comment there from Amrit saying about Hughes didn't sign Huijsen, and that is true in terms of he'd moved to Liverpool by the point that Dean Huijsen arrived at Bournemouth. But I would say that the work that goes into these signings goes on for so much longer than just the summer. He will have put a lot of the work in. Him and his scouts will have identified Huijsen as a target worth pursuing. Well, they've done the background on him in terms of he can be gotten from Juve this summer, a particularly cheap deal. They don't rate him as highly as we clearly see his potential. So it's not just about that kind of one summer. And so, Richard Hughes will have played a part in that move, albeit it happened and was finalised once he kind of moved on from Bournemouth.
And Liverpool also took quite a few of the Bournemouth scouts like Mark Birchall, didn't they, at the same time? So that whole backroom team, they will be well-versed, well-briefed on him especially as well. And yeah, all we know is it's probably going to be a crazy busy summer. But in the meantime, I mean, I still make no shame for showing this pretty much every single pod we do. Liverpool are top of the league, 9 games to go, 12 points clear. I mean, that is the ultimate rosy picture. It is just a question still of when, not if for us, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I know a few heads have fallen off in the aftermath of kind of a disappointing week, but Liverpool, I guarantee, will win the Premier League title this season. There's absolutely no question about that. I mean, was it 5 more wins, does it? And that's even if Arsenal win every single game. So, we're talking about Liverpool can afford 4 losses. Even if Arsenal are perfect, Arsenal won't be perfect. So, yeah, it's absolutely happening. And it's crazy that you've got so many games to go and Liverpool can confidently say that. And it's very exciting. It's something to look forward to, this running, really.
Yeah, it is. And you talk about the running there, and naturally people, I know we've sort of alluded to it, but we're really facing into this now because when it starts up again, these games do start to come thick and fast. And April even is a crazy month. There's those 5 big league fixtures, starting with the derby at home all the way through to Spurs there right at the end of the month. I mean, when you look at those fixtures, they seem pretty decent on paper, because if you look at where the teams are in the league that we're facing, is the one that you're thinking, I suppose, at both ends, one that you're like, yeah, we're going to win that. That feels like the best 3 points. And one where you're thinking, could that be the toughest?
To be honest, you always think Liverpool are going to win the home games. I would stick to that. I think, the Spurs on paper, you'd say is a tough home game, wouldn't you? Because, it's one of the higher profile teams, but they've been not that great this season. So, you should be beating them. And I think Liverpool will. And you look at the Everton game, again, that was tough at Goodison Park, but Liverpool were within a kick of beating Everton. They are in the lower part of the table. David Moyes doesn't have a great record coming to Anfield. Everton don't have a great record at Anfield. So again, you should. I just think Liverpool will be winning the home games. I look at Leicester; it's probably the easiest away game you could possibly have at the moment with the form that they're in. So I guess from that run of 5 that's coming up is obviously that Fulham one maybe sticks out. They're a decent side, aren't they? They can make it tricky for you, and maybe that's one where Liverpool drop some points. But it does look a kind run, and the fact is, you set up kind runs like this and put yourself in a position to capitalise on them by coming through tough runs and winning games. And Liverpool did that very recently. We think the City, Villa away, Everton away, all that they had to get through. They came through and they won enough of those. They picked up enough points in that run. And that's where they basically, for me, won the title. And the reward then is to come into runs like this where you should be picking up, I think, out of 15 points, you're kind of hoping that you could pick up 13. If they did that again, Arsenal will drop some points in there again, and maybe that might be even enough to win the title. But it's a kind looking run, as you say, and the whole running really. They've got a kind of tough end, haven't they? But Liverpool could have it wrapped up before then. So that's the aim, and let's hope they do it.
It's a funny one because with Arsenal and their games, it's still this perpetrated myth that Arsenal are just brilliant, but it's the injuries. But even when all those players were fit, it's always been around the 2-point mark. Arsenal have never gone to the points per game that Liverpool have, not even close, people, if you look at it. When you look at these ones, because it's almost that everyone's just assumed, well, Arsenal are going to win every single game till the end of the season. But you look at a few of these, there are a few you think, they could be tough, couldn't they?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Everton away, I think Arsenal have dropped points in that fairly regularly in recent years, it's felt like. And so that is definitely a tough one for them. And Fulham held them to a draw earlier this season. I think Brentford are always a nightmare in their ability to kind of sitting deep, make it difficult for you and hit you on the counter. I mean, Liverpool had a really tough game there, didn't they? Where they just nicked it at the end. They dominated and they did well, but obviously Brentford can hang on. They can make it tricky for you. So yeah, there's potential for drop points all the way through there. And as you say, it's not like Arsenal's form's been fantastic anyway. I mean, I'd be really surprised if they suddenly tick up to 2.5 points per game from here. I really can't see that, to be honest. And the fact is, they basically need to win every game to even give themselves a sniff of a chance, and they won't do that. So I guess the big thing for them is Saka coming back. But let's be honest, he is a phenomenal footballer, but it's going to take him a little bit of time to get back in, and we won't see the best of him until next season. And so the fact is, all of Arsenal's other issues that they've got are still going to be there. So, I just can't see them winning out between now and the end of the season. And that's what they'd have to do to apply even a modicum of pressure to Liverpool.
It is crazy. I mean, Arsenal are literally tracking at 2 points a game. Exactly. They've got 9 games left to go. So if they keep that average, that puts them at 76, which means Liverpool would only need 7 points to win the title. And that's the tracking all the way through, people. That's just a fact that cannot be disputed at all. So it is interesting.
I think Liverpool will get 7. I imagine Liverpool will get 7.
Yeah, fingers crossed on that regard. I mean, it might be sort of, people will say it's greedy, and I get that, but everyone is now starting to look at when do they think it's going to be, and obviously tickets will be like rocking horse dumps, as it were. So is it still Spurs you get that inkling for? Is that still the one you're looking towards and thinking where it could be?
Yeah, I don't know why. It just kind of it stood out to me. I think that'd be a great time to do it as well, wouldn't it? To win it there, to win it at Anfield, in front of the fans. To not have it decided with Arsenal dropping points would be nice as well. If Liverpool could go out and grab it, that would be absolutely fantastic. So that would be a nice one. Let's. I hope that's the case. I see your comments pouring in there, by the way. Yeah. Somebody saying they're going to end up second place after Arsenal. No, they won't. They won't.
Yeah, it'd say that people still sort of debating that. But what will be, I suppose. But we'll have to see how that running shapes up. And I suppose in a good way, because people have asked about this all during the international break, the questions are coming in. It is just going to be completely different from last season. I mean, last season, obviously the summer was a non-entity, wasn't it? Chiesa on Marmadashvili, that. But it's a title win that's coming. It's just going to be busy incomings and exits. And it does feel like, we hate using this phrase, but potential, the biggest churn almost we've seen in some time.
Yeah, that's it. And I Liverpool would have loved to avoid that and have kind of built in a slower and more methodical way. But obviously they've kind of lost a couple of summers to planning, because they've been that upheaval in the sporting director role. It's, they've not all been pulling together in the same direction at times, recruitment and the management. So it's been a bit of a strange period. And, it's just coming to the point where this squad needs to kind of hit the reset button, doesn't it? And have a big refresh. So, again, I still think they'd like to keep it to a minimum if possible and get as many of those contracts signed. And then, they'll sanction some exits, but as few as possible, and replace them as few as possible. But I just don't think there's any avoiding it. And so I do expect a busy summer for Liverpool. And, again, it's one of those things that kind of annoys people when you hear that. But I can promise, I genuinely don't think I've ever said that before in my time covering Liverpool. It's going to be a huge summer for Liverpool, because I very rarely, have they ever really needed one. It's only ever needed a lot of the time tweaks, or, even the midfield rebuild. Yeah. It was a rebuild of one very specific area. It wasn't ripping up the entire squad. It was tweaking one area. So, whereas I just think there's going to be so many exits that you can't avoid here, and those players are going to need replacing. I think this is the first time in a long time I felt comfortable promising that it is going to be a busy summer for Liverpool, and a big summer. That said, like I said before, I think the net spend could still be very, very low, and I think people should welcome that. If you can do another deal like McAllister for 35 million, if you can sign another player like Gravenberch for 30 odd million, these are good deals. So do them. So I still think, because they can generate a lot on sales and hopefully sign smartly, I still think the net spend could be low. But I think it's going to be a big summer of a lot of turnover at Liverpool, which will be, interesting, fascinating, and very, very nice to go into it from the point of view of having won the title and not being panicky about what comes next. It'll be it's a good spot to sell the project to players, isn't it, as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll see soon enough just how busy it is. But before then, we will see what the walk to the title looks like, or whether it's a procession or a romp, but we'll be here to cover all of it. And as ever, all it leaves me to say is for answering all questions, for giving us your insight analysis. David, it is much appreciated.
Thanks for having me.
And ladies and gents, that was another Media Matters by Anfield Index.